welcome to the Unstuck and Happy podcast. We all get stuck, but how long you stay there is up to you. I'm your host, John Polish, founder of the Unstuck Happiness Conference. And this is the show where we interview people who've overcome tremendous adversity and have emerged as leaders. So if you need a little inspiration and hope in your day, get ready, because here comes another great Unstuck story. Welcome to another Unstuck and Happy. I just love it when I meet people who just refuse to quit, who will persevere and aren't afraid to pivot and try new things. And today's guest is no exception. So help me welcome from Kansas City, Elizabeth Chritton.
Hi.
How are you?
Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great.
How are things in KC?
Pretty good. Hot and cold and hot and cold. You never know.
Right. Well, I'm in Las Vegas, so hot and hot. We don't get the variation here. Not during the summer anyway. Yeah. So, Elizabeth, you've been through quite a bit and eventually landed on running a successful business, which we'll get into. But tell us how you got there. What was your journey?
Well, there was a little bit of roughness in childhood, right? So intermittent poverty, Christmas without presents, food running out, eating oatmeal. I thought I'd do better as an adult. But early on, I ended up on welfare a couple times. So you kind of have to figure out things for yourself sometimes. And between 8 years and 4 colleges, I finally got my bachelor's. Got that corporate job. I'm like, I made it, I did it. And about 3 years in, the telecom bubble burst, right? I mean, every Friday they laid off like 500, 1,000 people. And there weren't any jobs to be had in my degree because there were thousands of us, right? So I decided to start my own business.
Right. Let's pause for a second because
okay.
you kind of blew over something that I think is critical right now. You said you had to go on welfare a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the world today, I mean, so many people are now on unemployment and seeking help because of, what COVID has done to our economy. And I want to hesitate for a second and just emphasize that you had to do it and it was a temporary solution, but you kept moving. And I think it's important because a lot of people today can feel shame or guilt or, a lot of different emotions that can get them stuck because they had to fall to this temporary solution.
Oh, right. Well, and when I lost my job, I was actually engaged or, getting ready to get married but there was going to be a gap between, because the company gave me like 3 months of health insurance and there was going to be a gap before we got married. So I was going to be without health insurance. And so I walked into the office. I mean, I'd gotten my degree. I'd gotten a corporate job far away from all that stuff, right? Like didn't need anybody anymore. I walked back into the office and I said, here's my situation. And they're like, well, fill out all the paperwork and see how you're doing. And I had saved some money. So all I really qualified was for health insurance for my kids. But I was like, well, I'll take, I didn't qualify for food stamps, but I was like, well, I'll take it, because it's just, and she said, you have no idea how many people that, 2 weeks ago, they were making $60,000 a year and now they're in here with food stamps. And I mean, there were a lot of stories at the time because like I said, in my metro, one of the biggest employers was just laying people off, week after week. And, people that didn't have savings, within a month, they're losing their house, they're losing their cars. And so many people just swallowed crow, went in and got on food stamps.
Where was that? Where were you living?
Kansas City.
Okay. You were okay.
And, but the telecom bubble burst. So this happened probably all over the country. And, people with telecommunications jobs were like applying to work in veterans office or, veterinarians offices or clean houses. Or I think one person went in and they applied for a manager's job. And the guy was like, we'll offer you 40. And he was like, but I was making 80. He's like, I don't care. I got 12 other people in that office willing to take 40. So take it or don't. Right. I mean, so many people had to swallow their pride after so many people were laid off. But the funny part was, so I signed up for this health insurance, right? For 1 month. didn't think I'd need it, but I did it anyway. And just got the packets in the mail, threw them in a pile. And during that month, my son was like 5 or 6, and he was swinging and he jumped off at the high point. And it doesn't even normally happen in kids, but he shattered his forearm bone. And they had to do surgery, put a pin in it. And if I hadn't signed up for that, it would have been about $10,000, which nowadays, I don't know, is it 100,000? Medical costs have gone up in the last like 17 years or whatever. But yeah, it was like, oh my God, I was so glad I'd signed up for it because it was free. And that's what those things are there for, is to help people over the rough spots. I think the second time I was on welfare, it was just like 3 months, but I mean, it was needed. I needed it.
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening right now that's going through that, and just know that there's no shame in taking advantage of the services that are available to you, because they're there for that purpose, to help you get through a rough spot. Welfare and those programs get a bad name because certain people tend to find it easier than working and moving on. But if you're in a situation where you've lost your job because of COVID and you have to take advantage of it, first of all, there's no shame in it, but also know that it is very temporary. You're just going to have to pivot like everyone else.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us about your pivot. What did you move to?
Well, so the company I worked for, they actually they would pay for you to go back to school. So I was over halfway done with my MBA when I got laid off from work. And, I finished it up that year anyway, just took out loans to finish the degree. I mean, why finish, why only go halfway? But I decided that I would just go ahead and start my own business. And at the time, real estate was hot. That was before the real estate bubble burst, right? But at the time, real estate was hot. I thought, well, I'll get into home inspection. And they had a program in town that would help people like walk through a business plan, right? And it was like a 5-month program, I don't remember, it was months long. And there were like grants around, it got paid for. And I was doing all this retraining and like thinking, just spent so many months. And they had grant money at the time to help people retrain. And so I was even getting money to pay for me to go back to learn. It was like a 6-week program, intensive program to learn how to do home inspections, right? And to get certified or whatever. So I go through this entire program and I had 6 months of unemployment and I had all my money. I had it all figured out. There was 6 months I was going to last. It was going to work out. And then they canceled the training. They canceled the training and they did not enough people had signed up and they were going to do it 6 months later. I'm like, but my unemployment runs out in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I kind of panicked and I had sold Avon a couple times in college just for a little bit of fun money or whatever, get a discount. And so I told my husband, I'm like, I'll sell Avon. He's like, just do something. Avon's every 2 weeks. So I get money within 2 weeks. And so that's what I started doing.
Impressive. Yeah. What was that like? I mean, how do you just
and it's funny because it was a pivot and then a pivot. Like there's just constant, there's pivots in my whole life. But, I had been trained. I had a job in college where I sold books door to door. And so I was new in town. We'd just gotten married. I didn't know anybody, didn't have a job, nothing. So I went door to door and I knocked on 1,000 doors my first 2 weeks, knocked on 1,000 doors my second 2 weeks. And that launched the business. But then from there, I started trying different techniques to sell and market.
So knocking on doors. So a lot of people say that public speaking is the number one fear. To me, I would speak in front of 1,000 people before I would knock on a single door. That just sounds like torture. I guess I'm an extreme introvert in some ways. And to think about actually approaching a stranger and knocking on their door is just torture to me.
Well, here's the interesting thing. And I know you're going to get to it, but I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit because I did end up writing the book From Knocking on Doors to Making Millions, right? And I interviewed 24 other top sellers. So we're going through all the different ways you can promote your business, all the ways you can grow it. And as I would go through each interview, right? So they're giving me the details on how they do this thing and the down low, and I'm putting it all together and combining everyone's information. But almost everyone ended their interview by saying, Yeah, and if I'd known this method from the start, I would have done it from the beginning. Or there's nothing hard about this. The hardest part is curling ribbon. Or, well, these things are easy to find. They're everywhere. That anyone can do this. And it dawned on me that each person had found their strength, that all of these people were like rock stars and super sellers, right? But they were all achieving success differently. And they were achieving in a way that spoke to their soul. Like, for instance, the lady that was selling, like, she sells like $70,000 a year online in a company that's normally person-to-person party, but she's an introvert. And she's not going to do parties, but she's great at selling online, right?
Yeah, and part of that too, I mean, I know from my experience that it's really easy to look back and see the system that you went through. It's hard while you're in the midst of it. And most of us, when we're going through things, we don't look for those. Like when I went through the tragedies in my life, I wasn't looking for someone else who had a plan or a system. I was just trying to get through day to day. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, I can see what I went through and systematize it. And I'll put it in a book to hopefully help shorten other people's, curve. But when you're going through it, if you don't know where to look for that information, man, it's frustrating and challenging.
Exactly.
But, knocking on 1,000 doors, I have to say first impressions are everything, I guess. And I admit my first impression of you, the first time I ever saw you, I have to admit you were actually hypnotized in a comedy show. So that sticks out to me.
Okay, you know what? I was hypnotized, so it was a dream.
but when I picture you, when I first saw you, I'm like, yeah, I can see her knocking on 1,000 doors.
Apparently I'm gregarious even in hypnosis.
So yeah, it makes sense when you think about it like that. But no, it does sound torturous to me, but you did it because you had to, right?
Yeah, I mean, and someone had asked me one time, they were like, what kept you going to every door? And I'm like, the kids in the house behind me. I mean, they were both young, and everyone that did get jobs had massive pay cuts. And then I kind of worked in the cost of daycare. And I was like, why would I work full time to bring home $500 a month or something, after all of the things. And they have those handy calculators online, bring in this much in daycare and da-da-da. And they're like, you'll bring home $500. I'm like, well, I could work from home and bring home $500. Right. And it was just, and like I said, it was my strength. I'd been trained in it. I mean, I'm talking, I know to knock on the door and not use the doorbell because 20% of doorbells are broken. I know to step back 2 feet, count to 6 or whatever the number. It's been a while, but there's like, you count a certain amount of doors. I had been trained on how to knock on doors, how to demarcate the neighborhood, how to know which houses have answered, who said no, who didn't answer, how to go back and work the neighborhood. Like I was just been trained. So it was easy for me. Whereas, well, Facebook didn't even exist, but there are people that are like, oh, well, I know this lady did really well on the internet, so I'm going to try it. And I'm like, okay, well, do you have an Instagram account? And they're like, no, but I'm so going to get one. I'm like, oh, okay, because there's like a whole learning curve. I mean, I've taken several courses on Instagram, and there's a whole thing. Actually, there's several whole things. And my whole philosophy, like I said, I wrote a book to share people all the different ways to promote their business. And what I discovered was that you have to pick the one that's right for you. And especially when people are starting their own business, they're desperate. They don't start their business because they need money 9 to 10 months from now. They're starting their business because they need money now.
Right.
Less than a month, something, right? So are you going to do it by, going onto Instagram and saying, create new account? Or if you're really good at talking to people one-on-one, maybe you should start there, right? With your strength.
So let's talk for a second about the emotional state of all this. Now, one of my taglines is that cognitive solutions do not fix emotional problems. Yeah. So for me, one of my goals for this year is to not learn much. Sounds crazy, but what I've realized over the past few years is that I have taken in so much information about running a business that I have gotten almost paralyzed and distracted, thinking, well, I need to do this, I need to do that. And now I'm like, I know enough. I just need to apply. I don't need to go to another lecture and learn something brand new. I need to apply the things I already know. That's not always true, and it won't be true for long, but it's true for the time being. But that's because I realized the reason I haven't applied a lot of it is just emotional attachments that I have from my past that hold me back. So a lot of it is, for example, the cold calling. For me to pick up a phone and call somebody feels like torture. So now I know that I have to either find a way to do that or find another way to get people to call me. So there's things that I have to do there, but I understand that it's an emotional problem, not a cognitive problem. It's not because the answer's not in front of me. It's because I have to deal with things within myself. So transitioning from what you were going through, like you didn't just go from being on welfare and struggling to now you're happy ringing doorbells, like, or knocking on doors. Like,
no,
there was an emotional transaction that took place there. Do you remember much of that?
Well, to be honest, there's a whole lot of survival mode. Like I just brushed gently over my childhood, but there is I will survive and I can do it myself. So just to be frankly honest, that's how it took me 8 years to get my degree, but I was going to get my degree. Right. And I think, I will survive. That is the number one rule. So if something's not working, then I change it and then I figure it out and I survive. So it's a little weird that's my emotional issue, but that's the thing that kept me going.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to be a little, maybe too honest here, but a few years back, I went through Al-Anon's 12 steps. And that's not for alcoholics. It's for people who've had alcoholics in their lives, right? But you can get affected by being around people who are drinkers. So I went through their 12 steps. And anyone who's been through it, like steps 4 and 5 are where you like lay your soul bare and you tell everything and you empty out or whatever. And I had been worried because I felt like my fears were the driving force that pushed me forward, right? I felt like the fear of running out of food or the fear of whatever would be the thing that kept pushing me forward and was the key to my success. And I kept telling the lady that was helping me, I was like, I don't know, because I don't want to, I'm worried if I lose the fear, I won't do well in business. So I went ahead, I trusted her, I went through the process. And when it was over, she wasn't surprised, but I was. I was like, wait, I still know how to run a business. I still know what I'm doing, but now I don't make decisions based on fear. I make decisions based on what the business needs or what I should be doing. So it was kind of interesting because, you're thinking that like emotional hangups can hold you back, whereas I felt like my emotional hangups were the ones pushing me forward. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's just my personality anyway. I'm going to do it anyway. But now I do it better once I cleared out the emotional hangups.
Well, what you did, and I don't know if you even realize it, but it's something that I've been working on recently as well, is that you transferred that emotion to your business. And so, in other words, almost as if you ran your business as if you were an employee of the business, yes, rather than this is my business. Oh my God, what am I going to do?
Okay, well, see, that's my thing with entrepreneurs. If they don't have a boss. And so all of a sudden you feel like you're flailing around. I mean, you're just a hot mess. There's no one to tell you what to do. I think my grandfather was an entrepreneur and I didn't really meet him, but one of his sayings was, it's great not having a boss. There's no one to tell you to go home. You can work all day if you want to.
And you will.
And so when you set everything up, when you systematize your business, when you put the processes in, and they don't happen overnight, but when you layer in the processes of your business and your to-do list, I don't have one that's not a hot mess right now, but I literally go through all the different processes and just put a system into my week. Mm-hmm. And then when I wake up in the morning, it's not, what should I be doing today? It's like, what's on my to-do list? And so my list is my boss. My structure, my processes, my systems, those are my boss. Because when I put on my boss hat and I create my systems, then later I can go put on my I'm doing my job hat. and I trust my system that it's going to get me where I want to go.
Right. So for me, just, kind of open up here a little bit too, is that I grew up with the whole mindset that anyone who's selling you something, beware, it's a scam. It's some, never trust a salesperson type of mentality. And so then I get into my own business where I have to sell stuff, and I'm terrified to ask because I was the skeptic on the buying end. So I assume everyone's a skeptic on the selling end. And then to add to that, my business is all about, so I'm doing this podcast. I started the Unstuck Happiness conferences where we bring a group of people together who've overcome tragedy. And it's kind of like TED Talks meets Chicken Soup for the Soul, right? These live events. And I realized that even in my marketing in that, I'm celebrating all the other speakers, everyone else. But my whole business was built around overcoming the struggle. So there's a sense of pride in saying, I've been through this, I've overcome it, I can handle this. Kind of like what you said, when your back's against the wall, you fight through it, and like you don't have a choice. But I realized that I took so much pride in that it was actually stopping me from enjoying the success. Like I was enjoying the struggle,
Yep.
And so there's something that at some point just have to be able to put the emotional stuff aside and say, okay, here's the thing about what we do and how it helps people, and here's the value to it, and take me out of the picture. There's a value in what is being offered, and it has nothing to do with who's selling it.
Exactly. It's a service.
Right. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I think it can be. My funny thing was, so here I am sharing my story, right? And even just a year ago, I didn't. I had been advised early on that welfare is a terrible thing. Never use that word. Only say maybe I received assistance, or just wash over it, because no one wants to hear that you've been on welfare, and they're going to think badly of you. And so I just never shared these things. And then it was a few years back, I finally did, and it just exploded because people have been through it. Right. People have had struggles, and I'd been cheating them of the truth of my journey by not sharing these things, making it seem like I had always, knew what I was doing, and and then how can people relate to that? Because you're not born knowing how to walk, right? And you can't tell your story. Well, I was born and then I was walking. It's like, no, there was some, you got up and fell over a bunch of times before you learned to walk. So, I kind of cheat people out of understanding the journey I went through, and and giving them the yes, you could come from a rough place and you can still end up with success. That path is possible.
Yeah, nobody wants to go see a movie about someone who got really good grades in school, got a good job, married their high school sweetheart, and lived happily ever after, right? There's nothing exciting about that movie.
Okay, well, that's Hallmark, but...
Right.
But then it always ends with two people being married.
Yeah, but there's got to be tragedy. There's got to be something that happens in there that we can relate to and help move us forward. And so by you sharing that, it actually, especially in times like these, man, people are really struggling today, and you sharing your story gives people hope.
Thank you. I hope it does.
I would hope so too, but I'm sure that it does. During these times, I talk to people every day who are on unemployment for the first time, who've lost their jobs, who don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, none of us saw this coming. So
no, I think the meme says everyone who made their 5-year plan 5 years ago, it's not working out. Right. It's not, the plan didn't work.
Yeah, it gives new meaning to the term hindsight is 2020, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are you up to these days? What do you have going on that you're excited about?
Well, and actually about COVID, right? So I did write the book, from knocking on doors to making millions. Over time, I ended up selling $7 million worth of Avon. No one has sold that much. It's just something no one's done. But like I said, I wrote the book. It's got all these interviews of all these people talking about all the different ways to sell. And what's happened for a lot of people is that and when I interviewed, it's not just Avon. So there's Mary Kay people, doTERRA, protein powders, kitchenware, added jewelry, all kinds of businesses, right? So I interviewed people from all over the industry, all over the country. So it's applicable to direct sales and honestly to a lot of micro businesses, small businesses. I just did a training the last 2 weeks with 4 ladies in the community, and a few of them are starting like craft businesses, like quilting or that kind of thing out of their home to supplement income. And another one wants to move her hair salon from, a retail building into her house. And so they're all making plans to build these businesses. But anyone who's had one, you've always done it this way, right? This is the way you've done it. And then COVID hit and it doesn't work anymore. A few people, like maybe that were only online, it's working, but almost everyone else has had to change. And so for people, that's what I'm doing is in a couple weeks, I'm finishing up the study guide. I'm going to set the Kindle version of this to free on Amazon. It's like for 5 days, that's the max Amazon lets you do it. And then they'll get a study guide with it. And everyone who's read my book, they all say it's an easy read. I keep getting people telling me they've read it more than once, just because it's so full of stuff. I don't have a lot of fluff. I'm not a fluff person. I kind of get to the point. And they're like, I've got Post-it notes all over it. I've highlighted. But every time they read, they like see new things and get new ideas. And really what people need right now is hope and their spirit refreshed and fresh ideas on how to approach their business. They need hope in the form of new ideas. So that's why I'm setting it to free. So as many people can get it as possible. It's not hurting me to help other people, build their businesses. These people, I mean, one of them, she's a teacher, but they didn't do summer school this year. She counts on that money every summer. Like that $3,000 for teaching summer school, like pays off chunks of bills, does projects needed around the house, whatever. So now she's going into quilting, to supplement. Even people with jobs need more money or are struggling. Or what was it? Like 50% of the households have had someone lose their job. So maybe the wife kept her job, but the husband lost his job. Or even you had a business, but the way you did it doesn't work. Like some people, their business is built on events, going to events. Right? Well, so there aren't events anymore. So like, how do you do your business? So that's the thing that's exciting to me right now is I'm writing my second book, and that's more on how to structure your business. I kind of realized all I did was give people marketing ideas. And then a lot of people have a hard time structuring how to put a business together. Like just because you know how to speak, or just because you know how to make quilts, or just because you know how to cut hair doesn't mean you know how to put a business together.
Right.
And so, yeah.
So I want to take a second on the whole network marketing idea here. I actually wrote a book a couple years ago about it, didn't finish it. And I need to. And I think it's interesting right now because it is an option for a lot of people who are feeling stuck financially. And there's a stigma about direct sales and network marketing. And one of the things that I realized, the reason I wrote my book, so my very first book was called Finding Your Happiness. And it's about I created this graph system where I can put someone's life on a graph in 2 minutes and see how happy you are and in what areas. And I started meeting a lot of people who were in these direct selling businesses, and they just all seemed so happy. And my first thought was, okay, direct selling is something that most people hate. If I offered you a job in sales, like most people would turn it down, they would hate it, but they get involved with direct selling or network marketing companies, and suddenly they can't wait to tell you what they're selling. I'm like, there's something going on here, right? So I did a little bit of research on it, and I went back to the 5 categories that I speak about as far as the 5 categories that make people happy. And these companies have nailed all 5 categories at the front end. Like in the front door, they're great at all 5. Where the stigma comes in is the back door. And I'll give you a real quick rundown. The first category is people. So when somebody gets involved in a network marketing company, suddenly they have a team around them and all these people that care about their success. So their people level increases, right? The second is responsibility or sense of purpose. Well, now you're selling a product that's making a difference and helping people, and you're running your own business. So that just goes through the roof. The next is activities. There's always events to go to and things to do. So that's improved. The next category is money. And now what's interesting about money is that, like, you'll get a room full of people in a company, and what they do is they put usually their newest millionaire in the front of the room, and everyone in the audience is sitting here going, yeah, that's going to be me. Next year, I'm going to be the next millionaire. Well, for most of you, no, you're actually spending more than you're making. You're the customer. But what they've done, what they do a brilliant job of, is showing you the path to getting what you want. And so when you look at it, you're like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And so that people stay motivated because they can see how they can get there. And then the last category is the environment. And every environment that they're in is high energy and it's positive. So I think every business can learn a lot from how network marketing companies structure their front end. It's on the back end, keeping that going. It's when people start to panic and then they're like, call everybody you know and get them over here. That's when that's where the stigma comes in.
Right. Well, and I say this understanding that I've sold 7 million. And so I'm one of those, unicorns. But yes, a lot of the companies, basically I call it chasing unicorns because, if 100,000 people join, you're going to get like 3 or 4 that become millionaires. But, what are your chances of being one of those 3 or 4? And then you said that they show you the path to get there. They kind of show you a chart with a lot of little bobbleheads, that show you how to get there, but they don't really show you how to get there, right? Not really necessarily. No. And I've actually joined like a couple dozen direct sales companies over the years. I'm called a kitnapper. I'll just sign up to get the kit, and then I look at their training and all this and that. But when I was actively building my team, right? Not anymore, all the training's online, but you used to go meet with the person one-on-one and go through a little book and do training. And when I signed up to sell Avon, the lady met me. She didn't want to bother like driving the whole way to meet me. So we met in a Kmart parking lot, and I signed my contract on the hood of my car, and she handed me a kit, but no brochures were in it because she didn't want to waste any money on me in case I didn't do anything, because she didn't think I was going to do anything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I swore that I would never do that to a person. And it was a little crazy because I would spend all day, like if I signed up 10 people that day, I would drive all over the metro to all these different cities. I would map quest it out there were no GPSs back then, to find all these people. And so I'm sitting down and I'm signing all these people up. And I know for a fact that there were a lot of people that did not train their downline, but I was adamant. I learned how to do it and I went to the training. And at one point you ask them what their goals are. Nobody said they wanted to be a unicorn. Nobody was wanting to make $1 million. At those events, you can get excited and you see a millionaire. So you're like, I can be a millionaire. But everyone was like, I need a new fridge, or I'm like short $500 a month, or like my car's dead. I need a new car and I don't have money for a car payment. They were real life, somewhere between $200 to like $600 a month, or a goal, that they needed to reach. These were real people with real needs, almost to a T, hundreds of people that I've worked with. And so we would sit down and it's like, this is how much you need to make. So this is about how many customers you need to have. So this is about how many different people you need to contact. How are we going to do it? So I would walk them because I'm making it realistic, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, I feel like none of them ever really show you how to get there, but they show you the little map of the bobbleheads how to get there. Right? Yeah. But I would walk everyone through how to get their money. And that's where I really feel strongly there are so many people out there that just need a few $100s more a month to make it.
Yeah. And it is an option for people. And the reason I bring up the 5 categories is to see that, it really can add a lot of value to your life as long as you keep your expectations in check and don't chase after the unicorn, like you said.
Yeah, no, you can make $1 million. And when I opened my store, I tracked my hours in the computer. I worked 90 to 100 hours a week. I wasn't even open on Sundays in the beginning. And I worked I was home 1 day a month to clean my house. and I had 3 children, well, 2 children, and then I got down to 60, 70 hours a week. So you can do it if you understand you won't have a life for a while.
Yeah.
That you will abandon everything else in your life. And that's not normal. I didn't mean to do that.
Right. And also, keep in mind what motivates you in the beginning. So I mentioned, you have this team of people around you that care about you and care about your success. Well, the moment they stop reaching their goal, they go from being those people that care about you to sometimes being that annoying pest. And like, I got involved in one early on, and I was like brand new in it, and I was just doing it more for the product than anything else. But my mom had passed away, and I was getting ready to go back to Ohio for the funeral, and I had my upline person call me and say, well, you're going to be around your whole family. Here's how you sell them. And I'm like, are you seriously telling me I should sell at my mother's funeral? Like, no way, And I realized there's that point that people panic, and the same thing that gets people excited can also chase them away. So if you just keep in mind that feeling you had when you first get involved and you first meet these people, that's the feeling you want to keep them, let them have the whole time, right? And so.
Oh yeah, that's super rough. And that's not even, well, that's just rough.
Right.
And that's not even being focused on what you want. I mean, occasionally, like the person who signed me up, it eventually quit, and I didn't even have an upline anymore. But and it's so funny. People say, yeah, I can't make it because my upline's no good. And I'm like, well, I didn't have one, so okay. But sometimes Avon employees would call and say, well, if you did this, you did that. I'm like, no, she doesn't want that. No, we'll talk to her. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not her goal. I always was very clear on what do people want out of this, and to honor what they wanted, right? And sometimes people want to grow big, but they're few and far between. Most people just wanted either to get a discount or to make a modest living, a modest side income. And that's why I feel like even today, I mean, I don't know, I just meet so many people that just need a little bit more. Do you know that if something like $500 a month would keep tons of people from bankruptcy? Mm-hmm. People are just that close to the edge of being able to keep their homes, being able to keep their property, not being upended. It's just a small amount of money that keep people afloat. So whether you're making your grandma's barbecue recipe, or you're quilting, or you cut hair, or you're selling direct sales stuff, people just need enough guidance to make that little bit of income. But if you've never done it before, you don't even, like you said, you don't know where to start. You don't know what resources to look up. You don't know where you're going. So when someone can offer you that resource to say, hey, this is how you're going to do this, that's helpful.
So let me ask you this. You have education, you have life experience, and yet you're being successful in something that didn't really require that education in a sense. I mean, anybody can get involved in it. When you look back on your journey, what do you think? What would you say about your journey to somebody who's just starting out?
Ooh. Like what part of my journey? My business journey?
Well, when you think about where you've come from, and when I look at it, I think about that, the studying and everything you go through to get an education, thinking that that's going to lead to some life that quite honestly vanishes right in front of our eyes, and we have to pivot, and you find yourself in a career that, you could have started probably out of high school or something, right? Without the education. And yet you found success there.
Right. And I have a hard time, people will say, go back to your 16-year-old self and say this, or what thing would you have not done? What thing would you have done? And the fact is, my journey has brought me here. Mm-hmm. Like everything that's happened to me has brought me to where I am. All the things that I've been through. I don't think it would have been a clear shot. I mean, I actually started going to school for physics, and then having so many kids and whatever, and I was just 2, but and all the changes, I was like, I need a degree fast, and I got one in networking and telecommunications, right? Because I could finish it and work. And that led me to that, and that led me to that, and that led me to that. And so I instead of wishing I'd done this or wishing I'd done that, or why couldn't I have done it this way? I think you just have to appreciate the journey you've been on and honor it for what it's done and how you got there. best freaking thing of my life is when I got laid off. Like, that company never sent me to the Bahamas. They never sent me to Hawaii or, the Mediterranean. No, and I would have never made that much money with, work, designing and reporting on networks. That's just not.
Right.
So sometimes, even when I had my store, I don't know, it was a stupid coffee table, and I was just walking past it and I broke my toe and I couldn't even walk. And it forced me to sit down and focus on my business, so that my employees were doing the selling and I stayed off the sales floor. Best thing that happened early on, broke my toe. The next best thing that happened, I had my son. And people were still kind of dependent on me because they liked me and they wanted to buy from me. And I think the day one lady, she was like, no, I want to speak to Elizabeth. And I came out there and I had this blanket and she's talking to me. All of a sudden she could hear a baby nursing and she just looked at me funny. And I'm like, well, you wanted to talk to me. But it forced me to focus on my business. It forced me to cut down my hours and take care of it. So all of these obstacles that come up, they kind of force me to do better. They force me to make things better. And so I don't always get mad at them because, and even now when these challenges hit and this stuff happens, I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing something different. I'm supposed to, something better is in store for me. Because I don't know how, I'm not super religious, but I feel like sometimes you can get mad when God closes the door and you're like, oh,
so
and sometimes you're not following the maze.
Yeah. So that was actually the perfect answer for what I was looking for. And my thought behind that is that so often things don't work out the way we planned. And too many people, like successful people, they're not successful because they don't have problems. They have problems and they pivot and move in a new direction while the rest of us still stare at the problem, wondering where it all went wrong. And the longer you sit there and stare at it, the more likely you are to get stuck. And I grew up thinking that, life was going to be easy too. I'd get my degree and get a great corporate job. I got my degree in marketing in 1993. So think about that. My degree in marketing really happened the year before the internet came out. You want to talk about the most useless degree, right? I mean, everything changed the next day.
Yeah.
So you just don't know. And the fact that you can take your experience and instead of asking why me, start asking, what can I do with this? What's my next move? How can I pivot and keep moving? Because we don't get stuck because of our circumstances. We get stuck because we stop moving.
Well, and that's something I put in my speeches too, and it's going into my next book. But it's like when people get stuck, they take it personally, and that's just not the case, right? So, I mean, if you think about it, if you're in a contest with someone or you're given a task, right, and there's two of you, and you get it done, and the other person doesn't get it done, what do you think of them, right? I mean, if you don't like them, you're like, what a piece of whatever. And if you like them, you're like, oh, can I help you? And because it's something wrong with them because you did it. So why can't they? And so whenever you fail and you don't get the thing done, you're like, I'm just a piece of whatever. and you take it personally. You take failure personally. You take getting stuck personally. And then people are like, I just wasn't meant to do this. I shouldn't own a business. I'm just not good at this. Oh, other people are so much better than me. And they take it personally. And it's not personal. COVID. Now it's easy when it's something like COVID. You're like, well, that wasn't my fault. But when maybe your plan needs to be fixed, or maybe you need to work through some of your own emotional issues, you just take it personally, and it's not. Yeah. Fix your plan. Go to a little bit of therapy or read a book. I mean, and I still think it's even when you need therapy, it's not you. That's the problem. Like, you can still do a great business.
Well, whether it's your fault or not, you can't. And I tell people every problem is a result of an unmet expectation somewhere. So if you're unhappy because you're not getting what you want, there's really only two things you could ever do to become happy. And that is do something different to get what you want or change what you want. And like, especially in the case of COVID, we have to change what we want. We have to pivot. We have to move. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. This has been awesome. How can we find you? How can we stay in touch with you?
Well, successwithelizabeth.com is my website. So you can find me there. Elizabeth Demas Chritton. No one can spell that. Do you put a link with this? Because my name is hard to spell.
I can do that. Well, on the video version, yes. The audio version, you might want to spell it.
Success with Elizabeth is the website, and from there they can find out more. And you'll even be able to find out how to get the Kindle for free when it goes free, and get the study guide. And I mean, as many people as I can help grow their business during this time, that would bring me joy. Awesome.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And
thanks for having me.
Join us again for next week for another Unstuck and Happy. Make sure you head over to unstuckandhappy.com, where you'll find the video version of all of our podcasts, as well as information about upcoming Unstuck Happiness conferences and moving beyond personal development retreats. Those are amazing. Make sure you join us again next week for another great Unstuck story. And in the meantime, keep living unstuck and happy.